Here we are in the advanced line of sight tutorial. We're going to check vertices and how they impact our lines of sight. This is building off of the standard 30-degree angle line of sight that you have to know, and how lines of sight bisect hex sides. We're taking this to the next step. We're going to see if those vertices are connecting and how to determine on some wonky LOSs whether or not those vertices will block your lines of sight. The concept isn't that bad. There's a little bit of geometry behind it, but go with it. Go with the explanations that I have and the game examples that I use, because that's what you're going to be facing during your games instead of just some textbook example. Textbooks are textbooks, but let's presume that we're in a game situation and then we're looking at these particular LOSs, and I'll show you how to break it down succinctly and pop those lines of sight, and knowing when your shot's going to be blocked or hindered with those inherent terrain. So let's check this out. Another 25-30 minutes. You can put on 1.5 speed, double speed, whatever you want to do, but pay attention and hopefully you'll learn some good lines of sight techniques. Thank you. Okay, here we are entering the more advanced lesson in determining vertices and their ability to either block or hinder fire. And so instead we were looking about lines of sight between two units and determining if pretty much if obstacles within hexes would block line of sight. And here we have rubble on the board, and we know that blocks line of sight for any LOS traced through the hex. Crag orchards are inherent terrain, and so therefore we all also know that those are hindrances, and they will hinder fire when fire is traced through those hexes. But these are specific types of hexes, being inherent terrain, and inherent terrain will also apply their effects if any part of the hex sides or vertices are to be crossed or contacted during that line of sight. The situation here, the German wants to move down the board to get out of harm's way from both the American defender and the Russian defender in this situation. You can consider these separate instances of a scenario or what have you. Here we're going to describe how you calculate whether or not a vertice will hinder or block your fire. So again, this will be a little bit more technical than the other one in terms of tracing lines of sight and bisecting hex sides. So bear with me on this. It's not too tough. You just got to run through it a couple times, and we'll cover it pretty simple and clear. So let's take, for instance, we have to take a little bit more geometry and apply it to the situation. I've switched the media to use the tabletop simulator simply because the tabletop simulator will give us a better view of the hexes. And that's just about it. Then we'll go back to our example, taking what we learned here, and then I can show you the same sort of steps in the example. But this is just so you have an easier visual. We're going to zoom down to D4 because we can zoom pretty close into D4, okay? We are going to take D4, center dot. The distance between the center dot and each of the vertices is the radius. So, oops, sorry. So that is a radius. That is a radius. And by virtue of the principles of equilateral triangles, that is also equivalent to the radius of the hexagon. Because the hexagon is made up of 6 triangles, all 60 degrees. Each one of these angles here is 60 degrees. Okay, so we're going to clear that out. That's an equilateral triangle. We're going to erase all vector lines. We're going to draw them again. We're going to make my little dot a little smaller. We're going to draw them again. This is much better. And that's what we're looking at. Dropping a vertical down from that line there will bisect that side because each side is 60 degrees. And this line and that line will be equal distance. So therefore, each one of these lines is half a radii. So if you take, for instance, this hex here, and you take this triangle, that's 1 radii. That's just a vertical. We don't need to concern ourselves with that. And this distance here is 1/2 of that distance. Same thing here, radii, because it's an equilateral triangle. Now, let's expand upon that principle. Let's erase these, expand out, and now we're going to begin drawing our lines of sight. Okay, we're going to draw our distances from F5 to G1, and then we're going to zoom in. So we're going to draw that line of sight, F5 to G1. You notice that it hits G4, the vertice on G4. And you also notice that it hits the vertice on F2, G2, and G3. That's what we're looking at. And so when you're determining your lines of sight, it may not be as clean as this, but this is the principle that we're going to learn. So that's the line that we're going to work off of. So keeping that line there, I'm going to draw that line from F5 to G1. Now let's break that triangle down into similar triangles. We need to do this so we can understand ratios. Remember, so we need to find that triangle there. Again, principles of the regular triangle, the triangle that we had here previously, the black one. I'll show you the black one. You guys are probably sharp anyway. This triangle here is an equilateral triangle, right? So therefore, it's drawing from the same sort of vertice down here. So when you drop this line here and drop it down here, this is going to be 1/2 of a radii. And the distance, the linear distance, the red line, we're going to describe as a unit length, like a a hex. So that would be 1.5 hex length. We don't care if it's a radii or anything like that. It's just the ratio. So you have 1/2 of a radii to 1.5 of 1.5 lengths. So 1/2 to 1.5 lengths. So taking it to this distance over here, what is that ratio? You have to try and figure out what that ratio is. So if you drop this one down to here, the distance in units was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4.5. 4.5 lengths. And the distance here is going to be a full radii and then another half radii, because we know each hex side is the length of a radii. So that's going to be 1.5 to 4.5, which is exactly the same ratio as this. It's going to be 1/2 to 1.5. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. So those triangles are similar. So therefore, connecting here, hitting here, will also hit there on that particular angle. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at similar triangles. So that's how we determine the distance there. So taking that into consideration, let's go back to our example on the VASL board. We want to determine how the moving unit can move towards the bottom of the board and potential shots that the defender has against it. We can draw the regular line of sight from the defender to AA. Let's say he's going to move into AA8. Unit moves here. Does our defender here, does this crag impact the shot from that defender? We've got a hindrance here, and a hindrance here is probably going to hit, right? So we're going to hit at least +2 right there. It's probably not going to hit this one because it's going to go through here. So our halfway point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2. So if we go 2 and 2, right? We do our normal 2 and 2. We go 2 here, 2 there. We're going to meet right in the middle. This is where we're going to bisect. But do we know if that's going to hit here as well? So taking the same consideration of similar triangles, We've got our HMG over here. We're going to fire on this location in actually in this location in AA7. We need to figure out the ratios of this particular triangle. Going from there to there is 1, there's 2, and there's 3, because we're going to go down this hex row here. And then our distance here is going to be 1, actually 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 3 to 6, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. Now we're going to take this location here, drop it down 1, 2, 3, 4, because we know it'll hit all the intersections here, which are drawn that straight line there. And then we're going to take this distance here, which is going to be 1, 2, and that's the triangle we're looking for. And that's going to be the similar triangle, right? This is going to be a distance of 2. This is going to be a distance of 4. So is that the same ratio? And it is. 2-to-1 ratio. So therefore, we know the LOS will contact that location there. So all these other LOSs are in the way. We don't have to worry about that because we know lines of sight going through here. It's not going to hit, well, it's going to hit this vertex here. But it'll hit this hindrance and this hindrance, which we don't need to worry about. It'll hit this one here, +1, +1. But do we get the +1 from the crag? That's the kicker. And this is how you determine that. So most of your LOSs that you're going to concern yourself are the 7 hex range, because the 7 hex range will contact a vertex here and contact a vertex here. You can memorize that, that's fine, but you can also extrapolate it out the long way, which will probably give you a much more reliable example. And then also the 5 hex range, well, let me delete those. That's the 7 hex range. The 5 hex range is going to be very similar. But here we have our vertices a little closer. The same ratio applies. You draw your distance here is 1 radii and a half, goes to that point. So that's 1.5. And this distance would be 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half to there. So 4.5. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. Taking our ratio from here, change it to black. We drop this one straight down and pull it straight over. This is a radii of 1. That's at the unit of 1. And this is simply a distance of 3. Well, we don't have to do any math on that. That's 3-to-1 itself. So we know for a fact it's going to hit this vertex. If that ratio were any other ratio, like take for instance, any other ratio. Let's say it's from this ratio here, right? From the further ratio, well, that's going to remain 1. That's going to be 3, and that's going to be 4. It's going to be 4 there, because you're only going over 1 radii and going up 4. So that's a 4-to-1 ratio. So we know that's not on the same ratio of the triangle. That's not similar triangle to that one over there. It's a completely different type of triangle. Okay. So knowing what we know so far, we have the distance here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means it's going to be up 3. You can trace line of sight by going up 3, down 3, and then meeting in the middle. It's going to hit here. That line of sight is going to bisect DD5, and it's going to clear the rubble. So we know that's going to be a clear shot for the rubble. Moving the unit to a different location. Let's say BB9. What's that distance? So we do the same sort of thing, the real quick line of sight. It's a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Max range for the unit. Let's go down 3 again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Meet in the middle. it should bisect that hex side. Which we confirm using our same principle, so we know that's a clear blockage simply by determining the 3, 3.5. We automatically know it's going to hit there, but let's change location. So let's move the unit a little closer. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to go down. Let's go down 2, meet in the middle. We're going to bisect here. Now we don't know if that's going to hit or not. So there we could do similar triangles. Doing the similar triangles, and again, you can either memorize it or you could just pull out the similar triangles. We're going to draw a line down here. We'll draw a line right there. And then we're going to see if this one is the same. So we have a radii of 1, distance of 2. Here we have a radii of 3. 1, 2, 3. Distance of, we'll count, this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this and this will make 6. So 3 to 6 is a 2 to 1 ratio. So this line of sight will definitely hit that hex spine. And let's verify. And so therefore, it will block line of sight to that unit there. And then the same sort of thing at ranges of 5. Ranges of 5 to 7 are what we're looking at if you haven't picked up on already. Moving this unit to 5. The hex spines, 5 will have to be inside here. 1, 2, 3, 4. That distance of 5. 7, he'll be 2 away. 5, he has to be 1 hex away. And at that spot, you know, knowing what you know about vertices, so we know that line of sight will impact this vertice and that vertice. Why do we know that? Because our line of sight we're going to draw is, we know where it bisects. It's going to bisect right in the middle. So drawing our line, we're going to go up 2, down 2, meet in the middle. It's going to bisect right here. And so therefore, terrain that's in DD3, blocking terrain that's in DD3, or blocking terrain that is in EE5, will impact both of those hex sides. And again, dropping down, if you want to do some quick math, and again, once this, you only have to do it a couple times and you're masters at it. We have a radii of 1.5. So it's 1.5. And then we have a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Okay, that's a 3 to 1 ratio. This distance here, we drop down 1.5. And we have a radius, a half a radius. 0.5 to 1.5 is a 3 to 1 ratio. So we know it's going to hit here. And by virtue of mirroring, we know that it will also hit at this location here. Simply working the same math from the opposite direction. It's exactly the same distance. So that obviously is the most difficult thing to comprehend. But working that out, doing a couple of these little math problems by yourself, pinpointing it out, most of our LOSs are going to be like we did in the first part of the video. Most of them are going to be very simple to calculate, very simple to know where it's going to bisect, and work from there. Most of those line of sights will not impact the vertices. 5 hex range at a distance of 1 row over, or a 7 hex range at a distance of 2 rows over will hit vertices. Other than that, you're probably not going to be firing too far, but you can use the same math to determine that angle. Try it in a game, you'll look like a nerd, but do the 5 and 7 hex ratios and eyeball it, or figure out a scenario you're playing right now, play by email, look at it, take a couple of the spots on there, don't draw your lines of sight, or you could draw a erroneous line of sight, work on this map or any other map, and therefore get that quote math down or the concept down, so you don't have just to memorize 5 and 7 and how it orients and something like that. You, as long as you can break it down, you can determine whether they're the same triangle. If it's not the same triangle, it's probably going to be one of our bisecting hex sides. And so we just need to know if it's going to hit a hex spine. And at that point, you could drop your lines. Very simple right here. Very simple. Distance of 1.5 and half. 3 to 1. You know, 4.5 to 1.5. 3 to 1. Same, they'll hit. And we'll verify, of course, as we always do. Okay. There we go. And we'll verify like we always do. And it will hit both spots. So use that. Enjoy your lines of sight. Master the lines of sight. And you will be picking off guys with 2-2 shots at 10 hexes, 9 hexes, 7 hexes, 5 hexes, whatever hex range you're going to shoot at. You are now masters of line of sight. Thanks for watching, and leave any comments below, and let me know what you think. Tough concept, but you know, thanks to David and rolling all this stuff down to one page that I blow up into a long explanation. It works well, and it will get you a lot of free shots, a lot of dead enemies based on those lines of sight. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining for the second part of the 2-part series of lines of sight. Vertices are very important, very difficult to kind of understand. Again, take your 5 and 7 hex ranges. That's probably what you're going to be looking at, and that's the only time those vertices are going to pop you. Longer line of sight for tank battles, you can still determine it. It just takes a little longer. Your ratios are going to be a little bigger, but you can still do it. Same principle from 5 to 7 hexes. So take that to the bank. Hopefully your lines of sight will get better. Hopefully your shots will improve. And just let me know. And we'll see what we can do for future events. Thanks a lot. Thank you, patrons, for inspiring me to do this video for you guys. And we'll see you on the table.